Before our service begins, I'll ask that people make sure their cell phones are turned off. Ecclesiastes wrote that there is a season that is set for everything, a time for every experience under heaven, a time for dancing and a time for wailing, a time for birthing and a time for dying, a time for speaking and a time for silence, a time for seeking and a time for losing. The period of mourning is a complicated one. It's filled with many emotions and many memories. We were just talking about that, some that are of years gone by, of family gatherings together, memories that I'm sure are very, very happy, and perhaps other memories that may be somewhat difficult and painful. But we begin our service with the recitation of psalms and prayers that will link Lillian's life with our 3,000-year-old tradition. Beginning with Psalm 103, Kirachem av al banim richam Adonai al yirei av, ki hu yada Yitzreinu zachur ki afar anachnu, enosh kechatzir yamav ketzitz hasadeh ken yatzitz, ki ruach avra bo ve'einenu ve'lo yakirenu od mekomo, v'chesed Adonai me'olam ve'ad olam al yirei av, v'tzidkato livnei vanim. As a parent has compassion for their children, the Lord has compassion for those who show reverence. God knows how we are fashioned, remembers that we are but dust. Our days are like grass, we flourish as the flowers of the field. A wind passes over them and they are no more, and no one can recognize where they grew. But the Lord's compassion is everlasting. God's kindness to children's children, to all the reverent ones, endures age after age, unchanging. Ben Sira wrote that we're all destined to die, that we share it with all who ever lived, with all who ever will be. Cry for the dead, hide not your grief, do not restrain your mourning. But remember that continuing sorrow is worse than death. When the dead are at rest, let their memory be a source of peace, and be consoled when the soul departs. Death is better than a life of pain, and eternal rest is better than constant sickness. Let us not seek to understand what is too difficult for us, nor search for what is hidden, nor be preoccupied with what is beyond, for we've been shown more than we can comprehend. As a drop of water in the sea, as a grain of sand on the shore, are our days, few in eternity. The good things in life last for a short time, but a good reputation endures forever. Larry, Carol, Kelly, Jeffrey, Valerie, and Abby, family and friends of Lillian Kabrowski. The book of Proverbs contains a striking metaphor which conveys to us a profound insight into the purpose of life. In chapter 20, verse 27, it states, Ner Adonai nishmat Adam, that the soul of a person is the candle of God. And implicit in this statement is the thought that in each individual, God has implanted a spark of the divine. And in Lillian, that spark shone very brightly. Each of us has been given the opportunity, or rather the obligation, to tend this spark, to care for it, to fan it into a flame which will light up one's life and the lives of those with whom we come into contact. This simile of Ner Hashem, the candle of the Lord, captures the very essence of the life of Chaya Liba Bat Avraham, of Lillian Kabrowski, who brightened the world of everyone who came into contact with her. The divine spark that glowed within her inspired her and others to acts of kindness that spoke both of God's love and of our fellow human beings. Lillian was born in Allentown, and she died this past week at the age of 96. She graduated from Allentown High School, and in her high school yearbook, I think they really hit the nail on the head, because it was written there about her, about Lillian, right? When you look for ambition, you look for Lil. She's the gal determined to do something and be something. She's interested in all activities and can really put up a good argument. When given the opportunity, she always enjoys a good joke and knows a few of her own. That paragraph, I think, pretty much characterized Lillian from the age of 18 up until her very last days on this earth. Lillian was as smart as anyone could be. She really was an autodidact. Books and education were something that the family as a whole valued and that she in particular really treasured. Every single morning, she read the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal. Even when she was recently hospitalized, she was asking for the morning newspaper to keep abreast of everything that was going on, particularly politics, because she did enjoy talking about politics and current events. A devoted Democrat. In the hospital, she told the doctor that if he was a Trumper, he couldn't work on her. And indeed, less than 3 weeks ago, Kelly took her to vote at the polls, and it really is really hard to believe that this vibrant woman was really nearing the end. Education, discipline, determination, all of these were things that Lillian prized deeply. Larry told me that he got his ambition from his mother and his deep appreciation of education. Lillian always emphasized the importance of finishing everything that you started. She always encouraged him to do better in sports, to do the best that he could, and the importance of discipline and a good work ethic. Lillian always encouraged her children to grow as human beings. When the opportunity arose for Carol to go on USY Wheels as a teen, Lillian supported that. She encouraged Larry to attend Cardozo Law School and even sold her mother's ring so that she could afford to pay for that. Lillian always wanted Carol to have the best. She'd take her shopping to New York and to Philly for clothes. And she encouraged her to have an appreciation of art and the civic theater. Lillian really took great pride in her children's accomplishments. She was very proud of her children and impressed with their accomplishments in higher education, and that they were able to accomplish things that she would have liked to have done when she was younger. She admired Carol's independence in traveling across the United States by herself. Lillian really had many stages of her life, and one thing that really stayed with her to the end was the fact that she had an incredible memory and that she was a voracious reader. In many ways, Lillian was ahead of her time. Long before there was talk about preventative health, Lillian emphasized eating natural foods and healthy eating, and I think it really made a difference, right? She looked so much younger than she was. I remember delivering a Shabbat Angels package once, and when I heard how old she was, I just couldn't believe it. It was really quite remarkable. Her family have deep roots in Allentown, in the 6th Ward, deeply rooted in her Jewish tradition. Lillian was very proud of the fact that she was of the Levite lineage. Temple Beth El was also extremely important to her. And when she was younger, she was very involved with the sisterhood and Temple Bethel. The kids were at the JCC every day. They lived by the JCC. And it really was a tremendous part of the family's life. And we were talking about that just a few days ago. Junior congregation with Lou Friedman and confirmation with Rabbi Greenberg. That education really provided a great foundation in Jewish prayer and knowledge of Jewish history and their tradition. When I heard this, it sort of resonated with me that Lillian, because I'm an only child, that Lillian was an only child, and the family didn't have a car. And I could really relate to that because my family also didn't have a car. And she had to rely on her legs. She was a great walker, and in fact, it wasn't until Norman died that at the age of 72, Lillian finally got her driver's license. It's really incredible. One of the reasons, though, that she did that was to be able to attend services here at Temple Bethel. And whenever I would see her, she was older when I would see her, and she would say, Rabbi, I really wish I could be at the temple. And Kelly, you heard that all the time as well, right? And there are some funny stories about that, but for another time. Growing up, Lillian never went west of Harrisburg. When the opportunity arose at the age of 74, she traveled to Spain with the Guggenheim Museum, and she also traveled to England by herself at the age of 80. I mean, these are just like incredible things when you think about it. Lillian got her first job at the age of 46 at Lehigh Valley Hospital after Carol and Larry finished high school, and she worked as a unit clerk on 5A in orthopedics for 20 years. Lillian always enjoyed a good joke. She was blessed, really, really, truly blessed to have the company of her caregiver and really good friend, Kelly. And Kelly just has story after story after story about Lillian. I'll just share one with you. Kelly would joke with Lillian and really have a good time, and she so appreciated it. Kelly would take her out to eat at Worth's Cafe or Chris's Diner, and Kelly tells this funny story of how Lillian could be feisty even in her advanced age. And, she was very, very organized and would make sure that things were getting done, including taking the garbage out. And she would say to Kelly, make sure you take the garbage out and wear a jacket. And if Kelly would go to take the garbage out, Lillian would ask her, where's your jacket? Well, on one occasion, Kelly went to take the garbage out without a jacket. And while she was out in the middle of winter, Lillian jumped up out of her chair and shut the garage door. And then when Kelly came back into the house, Lily turned to her and said, where's your jacket? So humor was certainly something that they shared and really kept her going, I think, for many, many years. When we light a yahrzeit candle, we remember Lillian and her wonderful sense of humor, her determination, and her kindness. A candle can be snuffed out or it can burn out with the passage of time. But a candle can also be used to kindle other candles and to pass on its flame to others, where its flame will continue to burn long after the mother candle itself has been extinguished. The soul of Chaya Liba Bat Avraham of Lillian Kabrovsky was a Ner Hashem, a candle of the Lord which lighted the small corner of the world that she inhabited. Lillian kindled in the hearts of others, family, friends, and fellow congregants a flame of devotion to ideals that she held dearly and to the Jewish way of life, which will continue to burn through the many years to come. Tihי nishmata tzura b'tzora chayim, may her soul be bound up in the bond of eternal life, and let us say, Amen. I'd like to call on Abby, who will say a few words on behalf of the grandchildren.
I'm going to share a few thoughts about my grandmother as I knew her, as my beloved Nanny. I've always adored Nanny, and I spent a lot of time with her one-on-one growing up. We went to New York City a few times together, and whenever I visited Allentown, I would always stay at her house. In New York City, she took me to amazing art museums and restaurants. I remember going to the Guggenheim and eating at the Russian Tea Room and Tavern on the Green. She had impeccable taste in all things, interior design, art, and clothes. In fact, she often shared her clothes and shoes with me, and I'm wearing one of the tops she gave me many years ago in honor of her today. It's from Talbot's, of course. And my favorite pair of rain boots are ones she gave me. I love spending time with Nanny for many reasons, but one that sticks out to me now is her directness. I delighted in her no-nonsense attitude, and she was always making me laugh. Nanny was very observant. She came to my law school graduation, and after walking past my car in the parking lot, she noticed within 2 seconds that my tag had expired, and no one else had noticed, of course. We joke that my oldest son, Wilden, has inherited Nanny's keen observation skills. Nanny was always so proud of me and my career. I think she derived even more joy from my accomplishments than I did. From what I know about Nanny and her career, she was one of the smartest, most driven women of her generation, and I can only imagine what she would have done if she had been born at a different time. I'll always cherish the love Nanny showed me and the pride she expressed in everything I did and the family I have made. It's one of my saddest regrets that I do not have many memories of Poppy, and I am so thankful for the multitude I have with Nanny. I had many years with Nanny. It was still not enough, but I cherish every moment. Sorry. Okay. And now I'm reading something from Jeffrey, sorry. Let me pull that up. Okay. And now I'm going to read some words prepared by Nanny's grandson, Jeffrey. He spent so much time with Nanny growing up, and even after he moved to China, he visited her all the time. And I'm honored to be able to share his thoughts about Nanny, and my sister Valerie and I feel the same way about everything he says here. So here are Jeffrey's words about my beloved grandmother. I spent a lot of time visiting Nanny in Allentown when I was younger. Nanny's house felt like a second home to me, and I always felt safe sleeping in the small bed that is still there. There was a restaurant at Penn where we'd often take Nanny for lunch. Nanny could be a bit of a food critic. When the food came, she would often say there was too much pepper or some aspect could be better. I'd often worry that Nanny wasn't having a good time, but after we'd eat, she would tell us how much she loved the food and the decor and what a fun time she had. To me, that was her way. She could be very direct in the moment, but it was her way of showing she was interested and cared about what we were doing. If I said yeah, she would say yes, but she would also tell me to do my best and always finish what I started. Nanny was great with our kids, Ryan and Mia. I worried that the kids had too much energy in Nanny's house full of fragile things, but she was always patient and kind. When Ryan was very little, Nanny taught him to play patty cake on the couch in her living room. Ryan's favorite part was the end at "Bake me a cake as fast as you can." Nanny would rub her hands over Ryan's hands, which would always make him laugh. Mia loved playing patty cake also. I do not know if Ryan taught her or if she first played it with Nanny during a visit. Even on the phone, Nanny would still try to play those games. There are many stories I could tell. Nanny went to all my big events, graduations, my wedding, Thanksgivings, and summer visits when I was younger. She was so active and energetic, even in her 90s. But what I remember most is how when we arrived at that house and rang her doorbell, she would give us a big hug and offer us some kind of crackers and cheese and fruit. We'd all sit in the living room, surrounded by pictures, portraits, art, and antiques, and we'd tell her about our lives. I remember when we'd call, she would always say hello in her special way, and then immediately give an excited "Jeffrey, hi," when she heard it was me. Whatever news we shared with her, however small, she would respond, "Wow," or "That's wonderful." She would try to say hi and play with the kids over the phone. I'm sorry I couldn't be here today from China. It all happened so fast, but I love all of you, and I love Nanny so much, and we will always remember the impact she had on our lives. Even at 96, it still feels hard to believe that I will not be able to call to say hi or to make another visit. We miss her so much and appreciate all the great times we had.
Please rise for the memorial prayer. El Malei Rachamim, Shochein Bamromim, Hametzeh Menucha Nechona, Tachat Kanafei Ashchina, B'ma'alot kedoshim u'tehorim, kezohar rakia mazhirim. Et nishmat chayali babat Avram, she'alecha le'olama. Began Eden eteh menuchata ana balachamim hastireha beseter kinafecha leolamim utzror Yitzro Chaim et Nishmata Adonai Unachalata V'tanuach V'shalom Al Mishkava V'nomar Amen. If you're continuing to Bethel Memorial Park, please make sure that your headlights are turned on. And yes, you can be seated for a minute or two.
Well, I want to thank each and every one of you for coming here today. We've always had our Thanksgiving for about 75 years of our family, and this will take its place. But the rabbi said a lot of, and he covered everything. And my mother was 96 and lived a full life, and to the very end was lucid, and she took no medicine, even at the end. So Carolyn and I held her hand, and she passed very peacefully with no artificial assistance. And I wanted to say, when the rabbi read that from her high school yearbook, it was very true. And she was determined to be something and be somebody, and she was interested in all activities, can really put up a good argument when given the opportunity. And each of you knew that. And I want to thank everybody. And my mother had a full life to the very end, and that's a blessing to have. She was, I think, the smartest person I ever knew, and was also the most observant person I ever knew. She had great powers of memory. There's a picture in the house for those who come over later. When she was 3 years old, she had her portrait done on Hamilton Street on the Boyd Theater, and she went with her mother. And remember, she was 3 years old at the time, and she remembered there were 23 steps going up to take it, and her mother was kind of heavy and was gasping, but she remembered that 93 years later. And when we had Jeffrey's wedding ceremony at the Pearl Buck House in New Jersey, when he came from China with his wife, Wei, afterwards, we were on a rural road out there, and she remembered some 85 years before that, being with her father in his truck, with her father's brother making a delivery somewhere in New Jersey, and she remembered the route. I mean, who would know that? I mean, 85 years later when you're a child, she said, well, make a turn here and turn there, and I asked if she had been there since then. No. And when she would come to a room, she would, within seconds, know everything that's going on, what everybody was thinking, and be able, and I would ask her what, and she would tell me exactly what was going through the mind of each person and what was happening. So she always had like a supernatural powers in that way, but she wanted to live independently, and she was able to live in the house she was in for 52 years, surrounded by all my father's artwork. And if I do nothing else in my life, I'm most proud that I was giving her the opportunity to stay in her own home, and we had care there for 24 hours, and I want to thank Kelly for giving her life. I always said she was like living in a sorority house because they're always joking and having a good time, and she had a full life. They would go out, and they were like more like sisters, and she was always joking with her and that. So to the very end at 96, if you can live a life, and I think you see yourself through the eyes of those who surrounded you, and she always said never live in the past, which sometimes I need to learn, but she was always looked to the future. So with Kelly there, she lived every life like she thought she was Kelly's age, so she never grew old and never felt old. And that is a blessing to your very end of your days, and to have a clear and lucid mind and live a full life. And that letter, or in the Comus, in the yearbook in Allentown, when they used to have that, it was always written by your best friend. That was written by her best friend, June Waters, who she was met in the first grade at Franklin Elementary School. And I was there, and my mother's 96th birthday, June Waters called her up, and you can tell the great love. So she maintained her friends for 90 years, and close friends, and I was kind of overwhelmed seeing my friends come here today. And I thank each and every one of you for coming, because they knew my mother for about as long as I did. And so that meant a lot to me for all of you to come today. And I thank the caretakers who provided such good care for Kelly. And I see Barbara here, and Debbie, and Yo-Yo, and everybody. And it's just meant so much. And my mother, I just said to tell a little bit about her life, was a product of Allentown. Few people were as embedded in Allentown as she was. She grew up at 13th and Linden Street, but the real life was at 2nd and Allen in the 6th Ward, where she met my father. My father was home on leave from the military, and my mother was standing in front of the family house at 2nd and Allen, and my father was going to services at Acudasockam, which was at that street, and they met then. So, and my mother's family helped found Acudasockam, which was the first Orthodox congregation in Allentown, and my mother's mother was from Northampton, and their family organized the first Orthodox synagogue, I guess the only one there, but also in Reading, where it was the first place where they came to America, and they organized in the 1880s the first Orthodox synagogue in Reading. And if anybody, the Louis Sussman on 2nd and Allen, it's still there. Anybody, it says L. Sussman & Sons, 1912. The building's still there, and I often would go by there. And my mother remembered going to Acudasockam and sitting in the balcony on the high holidays with her mother and grandmother, and the Kabrowskis. All the sisters would be there with their mother sitting next to them, and of course, and going back to Allentown, very few people, my great-grandparents, the Kabrowskis and Sussmans, were neighbors on that street in the early 1900s, and then the families merged. And my mother's family, this is a way of history, built about 100 of those row homes in the 6th Ward with my great-grandfather and his sons. and they had a barn there and a grocery store. It was kind of the center of Jewish life in the 6th Ward. As I always said, I'm very proud that my great-grandfather's cattle won the prize at the Allentown Fair from the cattle he raised at 2nd and Allen. Most people wouldn't know that about the history of Allentown. And everything I got from my ambition and education was from my mother's interest in it. She always took us to the Allentown Library and put a great stress on education. And I just wanted to make sure I thanked everybody, and my mother provided the work ethic to us. I always remembered when I went to Yeshiva Law School and she'd come to New York in the day, she couldn't imagine all the grown men that's hanging around during the daytime not working. That was unimaginable in her life and the work ethic. And I like to think that Carol and I have that instilled in us. And I want to also, my mother was blessed to have her other best friend in life was my father's sister, my Aunt Marilyn, who she knew in high school. They went to high school together. My Aunt Marilyn graduated 2 years later, and then they became in-laws. And to the end of her life, they were best friends as well. So my mother had a life well-lived for 96 years and always had control of her faculties to the end, which is a blessing. And I never got a chance just to say with my father, because I was too overcome in 1996 when my father and grandfather passed away, my grandfather at night and my father in the morning. And I'd just like to say, hearing my ambitions and value of education from both parents, and I never saw my father say an unkind word to any human being or showed disrespect to another human being. And I tried to be like that. I'm kind of emotional because I was not able to say anything, so I kind of held that in for 28 years. And I just like to say my mother and father were married in 1950, right after the war, and for 46 years. So when we grew up on Allen Street, and then my mother moved to Livingston Street, and where she was able to live out her years. But thank you, each and every one, for coming, and to honor and pay respects to my mother for a life well lived. And it meant a lot to me that you were all here, so thank you.
Thank you, Larry. Just want to remind people that Shiva this evening will be at Lillian's home on 2837 Livingston at 7 p.m. And the Sudat Havra'ah, the meal of consolation, will take place there also after internment at Bethel Memorial Park. We rise for the memorial prayer. Actually, we did that. I'm going to read it in English. El Malach Hamim, exalted, compassionate God, grant infinite rest in your sheltering presence among the holy and pure to the soul of Chaya Liba Bat Avraham, who has gone to her eternal home. Merciful One, we ask that she find perfect peace in your eternal embrace. May her soul be bound up in the bond of life. May she rest in peace. And let us say, Amen. We ask that the pallbearers step forward. If you're continuing on to Bethel Memorial Park, please make sure that your lights are turned on and that your emergency flashers are lit.